30 years of doing something doesn't help you if you're not doing it right. You could be doing it wrong for 30 years. That doesn't really help you much. Try not to be taken in by the overconfidence projected by foundation repair people, because that's exactly what it is. It's just basically hubris. Do your homework. Try to understand, try to find the right experts, and really try to protect your money from being swindled away from people that might not even know what they're doing.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owners Association, where real estate investors have found success since 1968. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group. This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB & Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 433. My guest today is concerned with the structural integrity of your home and your rental properties. RK Bob Brown is known as the Dirt Whisperer, and he's renowned for his deep understanding of foundations and his ability to address complex issues with ease. Bob is also the author of the book, Foundation Repair Secrets: Learn how to protect yourself and save thousands. Bob's wisdom centers around empowering owners with the knowledge and tools necessary to maintain the structural integrity of their properties. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became such an expert in this.
I graduated from Arizona State University with degrees in finance and in architecture, and started out my career basically doing concrete repairs, which eventually led into foundation work. And I wasn't really an expert in foundation repairs, but my supplier, who is typical, showed me the ropes. And eventually because of my ASU, I became a lot of friends with engineers and kind of took it beyond what my supplier taught me.
Foundations have kind of become your expertise. Talk about that. Like what do our listeners who own properties, whether it's their home or a rental property, need to know about their foundations?
Foundations are, in fact, no better than the soil they sit upon. So you could have a foundation made of solid titanium and it's still going to float on the dirt. So the dirt is really the key factor. And that's the thing that a lot of people miss. And dirt is not like some homogeneous brown mass beneath your house. It's many layers that have been deposited over time, and each layer is different and they're not parallel. Some are thicker and some are fatter on one end, and they have different properties, different mineral compositions, different density, different reactions to water. And so it can be very complex, which is why you have geotechnical engineers.
You own rental properties as well. Tell us a little bit about your properties and some of the issues you've had with your foundations.
I have 9 single-family rental houses and 3 industrial properties. Now, I did have one house that was located in very expensive soils. Locally here, we call it rocket fuel because it takes off when it gets wet. And I had a tenant who decided to plant the flower garden next to the house and not tell me about it. And next thing I know, they call me up and they say, "Hey, we can hear water running underneath the house." And I'm like, "You can hear it?" I'm like, "Yeah." So I went over there, and sure enough, you could hear the water pipe. It was broken and it was running. Now, it just so happens that because I knew that they installed this flower garden, I installed a moisture level system just probably a few weeks beforehand. That's a system that I patented it, and it basically uses a vacuum system to dry out the soils underneath the foundation. And luckily, this foundation did go all crazy on me because I had the system installed, which was kind of proof in the pudding for me that it really does work.
So the tenant had a flower bed, so water was kind of dripping beneath the house.
They installed this flower bed and it started to move the soils. Once the soils moved, then it moved the house a little bit and broke a pipe.
Just from a flower bed?
Yeah.
Well, what happens when it rains?
The rain sheds the water to the outside of the eaves, and they planted this right under the eaves. So it easily went right under the foundation. That's the problem with some people don't realize with flower beds.
So soil matters a lot. Can you talk about the different types of soils? And you're in Arizona, so you're probably dealing with very different soils than what we might have in Michigan here. But can you give us kind of a primer on soils and what you should look for if you're buying a property that might be like a red flag?
As you mentioned, it's a regional thing. So, maybe up north, you might run into glacial till, around the central parts of the country and just about everywhere in some degree, you're going to have expansive clays. And expansive clays, a lot of people have heard that term, don't understand what it means. What it means is when water hits those clays, it actually expands. And when the water dries out, they shrink. And you've seen maybe pictures of the desert with all the cracks in the dirt, right? Well, that's what happens when it dries up. It all shrinks up and cracks like that. And then you just have regular old sands and silts maybe that haven't been compacted properly, or maybe air deposited loess, which is a kind of a dust. And that doesn't get compacted very well. And it could be in the layer. It might not be in the top layer, right? It might be in 3 or 4 layers down. You might not even know it, right? So any of these things are possible. So it's important that you understand the local conditions. The NCRS, the National Soil Conservancy, I always say this wrong. National NCRS. It's basically put out by the Agriculture Department, and they produce maps of clay soils, and it's free. You can go on and look on it online, and you can find out if your home is what kind of soil it is, and if there's clays or not. In some cases, you have karst where you have lime that's been eaten away. Like in Florida, you get these big old sinkholes, but you can get them other places besides Florida. So you can learn some of these things and find out if you're in danger of some of those problems.
And how would you find that out? I mean, where would you go to know what your soil is, or who would you talk to?
I would first go to the NCRS website.
Let's say you've bought a property and you find that you do have clay soil and it's causing a problem. What kind of fixes are available for that?
It depends what the clays are doing. So if you're in a wetter climate, let's just take, for example, Louisiana, that's, very wet, right? The soil's been wet for thousands of years, and you put a structure on top of it. Well, guess what? Over time, the edges might dry out. And when they dry out, then you might have a little bit of settlement. So in that case, the appropriate thing is to maybe keep a water soaker around the edge of the house to keep it nice and wet, right? And if it gets too bad, you're going to have to put in what they call a piering or a piling product, a pier that goes down past those soft soils, locks up into some load-bearing soil strata, and basically can hold this house steady and even re-level it. Now, if you're in a drier climate like Arizona or, maybe interior California or interior Washington or Oregon, any place you have drier climates, you have the opposite problem. You have soil that's been dry for millions of years. You put a house on it and the water sheds to the edge of the house and doesn't really drain very good, maybe. Well, that water is going to start accumulating underneath the house. It takes 20 years. It doesn't happen overnight, but over a long period of time, this water accumulates. And what does it do? Well, there's clays there. It activates those clays and they start expanding. And so you get what we call heave. And a lot of times it happens towards the middle of the house and it looks like settlement. It can be easily confused because the middle's going up and you're thinking, well, the edge is lower, so it's got to be settling. Well, no, it's not. The middle's going up. And in that case, putting a piling product on the edge is worthless. It's not going to do you any good, might do harm, probably counterproductive. And so in that case, you, instead of putting a soaker around the edge of the house, you want to dry it out. You want to get the water away from the house. And you want to make sure that no water gets under the house, which is why I invented that moisture drying system we talked about earlier. It actually dries out under the foundation to stop this expansive heave.
How often do structures have these problems? Is it very common, or is it something where just, maybe it happens every now and then with some properties?
It really does depend where you're at. So the fact of the matter is, if you're in Texas, like Dallas or Houston, if you haven't had foundation problems yet, you probably will. If you're in Phoenix, Arizona, maybe 1 in 10,000 houses has a problem. And other parts of the country, there's everything in between. It just depends where you're at. Denver has a lot of problems. There's a lot of issues along the eastern seaboard, lower eastern seaboard around, Virginia, Georgia, North and South Carolina. Florida has issues with sinkholes, but Texas is probably the epicenter of the worst problems. Arizona is probably the epicenter of the least problems.
What do you know about the Midwest? I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I'm curious if you have any insight into our soils.
So I think it's a little wetter environment. When you get snow, you get a lot of melt, which soaks into the ground more. When you get rain, it kind of sheets off and goes, wherever, right? With snow, it melts slowly, goes into the ground, so you get more soil absorption over time. So it's like having a lot of rain. And so areas like that tend to have a lot of moisture as a result of the slow melting of the snow, but also a benefit, you typically have deeper footings. And the reason you have deeper footings is because you want to resist frost heave. The soil freezes down to a certain depth. And in order to avoid that, the builders build the footings deeper. And that deeper does protect you in a lot of ways. So you got good and bad coming, in places like Michigan. I mean, there are definitely foundation repair contractors there, so I know there's work. I know there's problems.
One of the things I noticed, that I've lived both in Los Angeles and in Michigan. In Michigan, everyone has a basement. You get out to California, you don't really see basements. You might see some crawl space underneath the house. Can you talk about that difference there? Why is that?
When you're up north, in higher elevations, you dig down, as I mentioned, deeper for these frost depths. Well, if you're digging down quite a ways, not that much harder to dig a little bit deeper and just put in a basement. So it's a matter of economics, and it just works out. Down south, you have more slabs on grade, as you mentioned. That's the common thing here in Arizona. And a lot of areas kind of in between have crawl spaces. And older homes have crawl spaces. I think the crawl space is actually a good idea. It's got a lot of good merits going for it, but builders nowadays don't build with them.
What's the merits of a crawl space? Because I find them creepy and dark, and I certainly don't want to crawl through a space.
First of all, you have to know that the conventional wisdom about crawl spaces has been wrong. Everybody in the past has always wanted you to ventilate them, right? Well, that's the wrong thing to do. When you ventilate them, you're inviting moist air in. And moist air, mold and things, it's easy to get mold growing on wood. And then pretty soon you've got mold spores going everywhere, including up into the upper part of your house, because 40% of the air in the crawl space is shared with the space above. So now you got mold coming up and above. In addition, you got creatures going down there, small creatures, because it's nice and wet. And then you got bigger creatures going after the smaller creatures, and they all poop and die, and you're sharing that air. And so the thing to do really with the crawl space and is to insulate them and seal them off with a good sturdy liner. Now you got a kind of an extra storage space. Now you should put in like a sump pump and a dehumidifier as well to keep it nice and dry in there. But now you're not having to heat up moist cold air or cool down moist hot air that comes up through the crawl space. So it serves a bunch of purposes and it works great. The reason I like crawl spaces is because you don't have heave. You could heave your footings, I guess, but it's pretty hard to do. Most heave slabs occurs in the slab. So it simplifies things, and it provides a little bit more stability, I think, in the long run.
You mentioned sinkholes, and that's kind of like getting eaten by a shark. Every now and then you see a report in the paper that someone's house fell into a sinkhole, which sounds like the most awful way to leave this earth. What do you know about sinkholes, and what can you share about that?
Sinkholes are basically where you have limestone and water leaks down to the limestone layer and starts dissolving it over time and makes caverns. Like, there's here in Arizona, you have Kartchner caverns and you have Carlsbad caverns and you have other famous caverns. Those are limestone caverns that are dissolved by water. And if that limestone gets eaten away close to the surface, well, guess what? It gets weak, and then you can fall a long ways. I remember a while back, a Corvette museum got swallowed up by one. I think it was in Kansas or something. But you hear about it in Florida. There was a guy that his home fell in and they never found the guy.
How would someone know if they're on a sinkhole? I mean, we even had that apartment building in Florida that kind of fell into a sinkhole. So what are some of the warning signs you would look for?
Know your geology. It's the best thing I can say. You could hire a geotechnical engineer to help you understand it, and he might propose some testing or whatever. Almost nobody wants to pay for a geotechnical engineer, until the problem occurs, and then they wish they would have, right?
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB & Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. I'm sure you've seen all kinds of problems with foundations, and let's kind of go in that direction. Like, what are some of the common problems people have, and how would you advise them to fix those problems?
First of all, you have to recognize it. So the things you would keep your eyes peeled for would be cracks in your walls. And when I say walls, I mean typically interior walls. If you have a frame stucco system, I mean, if you got really wide cracks in the stucco, but stucco cracks for a lot of reasons. So I pay more attention to the drywall cracks on the inside. Certainly block, stair step cracks or brick. You'll notice those both inside and out right away. And you'll see doors and windows that are pinched. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the door, there's a gap at the top on one side and it's pinched on the other side. That door frame is being put out of square by forces that are uneven. One side's going down and one side's going up. And windows can do the same thing. And certainly you'll notice floors sloping. Like some people put a golf ball on their floor, and if it rolls around, well, then you know your floor is sloping, right? Now, all floors have a little bit of unlevelness just from construction tolerances when it's built to begin with. But I'm talking about, bigger slopes, right? So those are the things you would keep your eyes peeled for. Now, those things could be indicative of both either heave or settlement, right? So really, to understand it, you really don't want to call a foundation repair company, because what are they going to do? Hello, they're going to send out a foundation repair salesman who is on 100% commission for everything he can sell. And these guys are not engineers. They are not educated. An engineer has to have 5 years of school, 2 years of apprenticeship, and take 2 very difficult exams to become a PE. What does a salesman for a foundation repair company get? He gets like a 2-day seminar put on by his single source supplier. So there's a huge gap of difference there. And there's a huge motivation difference. There's a huge conflict of interest that occurs with the foundation repair salespeople. So my advice is not to call them to figure out the problem. My advice is to call an engineer, and he will investigate the problem and should give you a plan to repair the problem. And then you can take that plan out and bid it. Typically what happens is people call 3 foundation repair contractors, and one guy says, well, you got to have 12 piers over here. And the other guy says, no, you need 14 over here. And another one says you need 25 all the way around. And how do you know who's right? Homeowners aren't experts, right? How are they supposed to figure that out? Well, they go with the guy that they feel most comfortable with. Well, who's that? Well, that's going to be the guy who's the best salesman, right? And he might not necessarily be the best engineer of the two, right? And none of them are engineers, but I mean, typically to diagnose problems, you need a very detailed mindset, be very detail oriented. And good salesmen are not detail oriented. I know. I owned a foundation repair company for 35 years, and I also owned a forensic engineering company for quite a while. And I can see the difference in personalities and how they work. And certainly my best selling salesmen were always the ones that were getting it wrong. And that's why I went to an engineering company to help diagnose it, because I was just tired of dealing with the problems.
Say again for our listeners, if you have a problem, go to a certain type of engineer, and what is that type? And then where do you find them? Like, you just look in the phone book, Google them? How do you find them?
The first thing that people do is they go to Google, right? Everybody Googles foundation repair problems, right? Or foundation repair, whatever. Who are they going to find? They're going to find foundation repair companies because they're really good at marketing and they have a lot of dollars to do it. I was a member of, before I sold my companies, I was a member of a network called that was ran by Basement Systems, and they're a great company. They had 100 people in their internet marketing division, 100 people. I mean, it's tough to compete with that, right? I mean, they had Google coming to their offices. So that's why people can find them easy. Now, what kind of an engineer do you really want? Most people call a structural engineer. Well, that's wrong. You shouldn't call a structural engineer. In my opinion, some structural engineers can be good at forensics, but you want a forensic engineer for sure. But I prefer a forensic geotechnical engineer. And the reason is, if you ask a structural engineer, okay, yeah, I got cracks in my house, and he'll say, oh, it's not a structural deficiency at this point. And then you ask him, well, could it become a structural deficiency? Oh, yeah, maybe if it keeps moving. Well, is it going to keep moving? I don't know. You got to call a geotechnical engineer. Well, thank you for wasting all my time and money. And that's basically where you end up. So I just prefer go straight to the geotechnical engineer and get, because this is a dirt problem, basically. It's the house probably wasn't built improperly, although it does happen, but not nearly as often as dirt problems. So you want to understand the dirt.
So where do you find a geotechnical engineer?
It's tough, and there's not a lot of engineers that do this. Most engineers work, on infrastructure projects, freeways, dams, sewer treatment plants, airports, commercial buildings. Some very few work in residential, and even fewer than that do forensics. So it's hard to find them. It takes a lot of sleuthing, and I'm trying to help solve this problem, and I'm trying to encourage more engineers to go into this line of work and perhaps help give them the tools to make them successful, because I want to see this change. And I've assembled, I'm in the middle of assembling a directory on my website, which is Foundation Repair Secrets, same as my book. And hopefully people will be able to find somebody in their area. Now, some places have a lot and some places have none.
If you can't find one in your area, then what would the next best option be?
That's really tough, because my guess would be to try to find somebody as close, as nearby as you possibly can, and it might be a few hour drive, which is going to be more money. But honestly, the foundation repair companies, they send out the sales guy and they're going to do their analysis for free, but you're going to pay for that. You're going to pay, they're going to get your money back from that, trust me. And they're going to pay for that visit one way or another. And so you're going to have to pay for an engineer. It's not going to be free, but you're going to save a ton of money on the back end. It might be that all you need to do is fix drainage and grading. And that's a heck of a lot cheaper than spending $40,000 or $80,000 on piers. You might spend $1,000 or maybe even $2,000 on an engineer, but you might save $80,000 on something that you don't need.
Bob, you got any good foundation horror stories for us?
I've seen just about everything you can imagine over the years. I've seen one house that had decomposed granite soils, and the water line to the pool was not glued. So the elbow came off when the pressure came on and flooded those areas, those soils, and that house settled 12 inches on one side. I've seen houses heave 9 inches on one side. There's an industrial building. This was the biggest project of my career, settled 15 and a half inches and was moving at a half inch. It was settling at a half inch a day. I mean, not a day, a month, sorry, half inch a month. and it was ready to collapse. It was in serious structural shape, and we spent almost 3 years fixing it for $6 million. It was a lot of work, but we raised it up. It was cool. We raised it up so high, 15 inches, back to level again. You could actually crawl underneath the footings of the building. There was a space underneath there. Pretty cool job.
How could that have been avoided in the first place?
Well, that particular building was built on a landfill. So they kind of knew going in that there was maybe a potential for problems. And there was 12 other buildings on the site that didn't move. So I don't really know what happened on that particular location. They used what they call deep dynamic compaction. And that's where they take a big old crane with a big 100-foot tall crane with a big weight, 6 foot by 6 foot, big old steel thing, and they drop it 100 feet. Ooh, the ground shakes and everything goes crazy, but it compacts the soil. Well, we discovered that it only compacts it down to about 30 to 40 feet, and it doesn't compact it any deeper than that. And so if you've got problems deeper than that, it doesn't solve those problems. And that's one of the things we discovered on that site.
Anything I should be asking you about foundations that we haven't talked about yet?
From the real estate industry, what I would like to see happen someday is that on every real estate transaction, there be an engineering report. So we have transparency. And we can also use the data from before to see how it moved during the intervening time. Very valuable data once you can start collecting it. And it doesn't happen today, but I would like to see that happen. And, as a buyer of real estate, it's a tough ask to ask somebody, hey, go spend $1,000 on a house you may not buy, right? That's a tough ask. I get that. I would really want the sellers to put it on them. You go out and get a good report. You want to sell your house? Okay, go get a good report from a good engineer, a good forensic engineer, and get a clean bill of health that you can give to the buyer. Now, if it's not shipshape and you need to do something, well, follow the engineer's directions. And when you get done, get his approval. Let him be the special inspector on the job so that he can approve of everything, and then get a clean bill of health. And then make that data available for the next transaction. That's the way I would like to see it happen someday. I'm a big campaigner for that. I realize it's a big lift. I get that.
How would people find out more about you or get a hold of you? And once again, please feel free to plug your book.
It's easy to find me if you just type in Foundation Repair Secrets, and maybe you might have to put in RK Bob Brown. It was a bestseller on Amazon, so it should be easy to find on Amazon. And my website is the same title. And I've got a blog on there, and I've got lots of handy information for homeowners to learn the business, to learn about soils, to learn about structures, so that they don't get taken. Because frankly, these foundation repair sales guys, they're very confident. I mean, they're very persuasive. I know, I had a bunch that worked for me. They would tell customers, oh yeah, I'm better than an engineer. I've been doing this for 30 years, and those engineers, they go to school and they don't know anything but books, and they're very convincing. But the truth of it is, 30 years of doing something doesn't help you if you're not doing it right. You could be doing it wrong for 30 years. That doesn't really help you much. So try not to be taken in by the overconfidence projected by foundation repair people, because that's exactly what it is. It's just basically hubris. And basically do your homework and try to understand, try to find the right experts, and really try to protect your money from being kind of swindled away from people that might not even know what they're doing. My famous line is, don't get nailed by people who only have a hammer for a tool.
What's your favorite hack or app?
I look at, other than the normal, email and text and WhatsApp and that kind of stuff, I look at My Radar, which is a really cool app for trying to see where rain comes. It's free. And you can see the clouds approaching you, and weather forecast, pretty accurate. And I use that a lot when I'm up at my cabin in Prescott, because it rains a lot and snows a lot up there. and really cool. I mean, you can see the storms coming, the clouds coming, and pretty accurate.
Bob, thanks for coming on the show and talking about foundations. And you talk about doing your homework when you have a foundation problem. And I think you've just given a 30-minute masterclass in the structural integrity of your home, the soils that you should be looking at, and the different foundation issues that might come up. So thanks so much for having this conversation with me. It's been a real pleasure.
You bet. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's HIG investor.com.